And to see that view of God just blows my mind just one more time. I'm so excited about our trans-spirituality and what that has brought to me in my experience of knowing God. And to know that that God is enabling us to enable one another to become fully human and to become fully alive in who we are. I want to tell you that that is such a gift, such a blessing. And to see that view of God, that view of who God is, helps me to deepen my own spirituality and to deepen my own experience of the one who called me by my name, who called me by my name. What a journey we are on together, to experience the diversity and the newness and the coming alive of God right here in the midst of us. You see, friends, we don't have to experience or see God from a distance, but we get to see God close up, right in front of us, through the lives of the people who sit amongst us, through the lives that are transforming amongst us, and through the lives that are you and me. On Wednesday, I heard one story. In fact, I heard several stories, but they had a common thread amongst them. And the common thread that seemed to be amongst them was that most of our trans folk have had that experience of dying to the old self and being born again to the new self in a way that I've never experienced. I want to tell you, I think that is exactly what Jesus talks about in the images of baptism, about dying to old and rising again to new. And I've experienced that emotionally. I've experienced that about the psyche of my own spirit. I believe that baptism happens for me every day. I don't believe that baptism is just a one-off experience. I believe that we are constantly dying to the old self and being born again to the new. In fact, if we are truly living the experience of Christ, then there's not a day that we aren't transforming. Right. There's not a day that we're not being changed in the twinkling of God's eye. But our trans folk were able to share with me something about the physical death and the physical resurrection that I wasn't able to experience. And I listened to those stories about how they've had to leave behind friends, leave behind family, leave behind good salaries, leave behind privilege perhaps that they once had, and leave behind all of those things because they needed, I needed, you needed to fully become who God had intended us to be. And that the cost of that was so weighty, so heavy. And yet imagine waking up every day knowing that you had to do because this is who God had made you to be. Dying to the old self, leaving it all behind. I want to tell you that's not an easy thing to do. There are many of us who wouldn't want to face that on a daily basis. And yet the gift of being able to allow us to witness that in our own church and in our own lives. Dying to the old self, but then being born again, risen again, baptized again, experiencing the fullness of God within us and them. And I hate that. I know I say that every now and again, the us and them, because I truly believe that there is no us and them, but rather we. But our experiences are different. But being born again to that new experience of fully alive, allowing the outside to match the inside, and the completion that must feel like. I think that's what Jesus was trying to do in his own life, was to know that there was this inner yearning to become fully a child of God in the fullness of that experience. And that in many ways the only way he was able to do that was to die and to rise again. And our trans folk know that experience of truly dying to the old self and being born again. It's a new life. Many of the old situations and the old friends and the old experiences are no longer there because of prejudice and oppression. And being born again to that new experience of having to start over. I don't know, Susan, I know you're here with us this morning, but how old does that make you? 4 or 5 or 6? You count in dog years. About 35. How amazing. amazing to be born again and to begin again and to live again. Friends, I want to invite us in our own way to also have that experience of rising again. Matt, I truly believe you are born again. In the experience, there's so much of the old that has gone and you are risen again. For those of us who self-identify as lesbian and gay, there is much that we've had to leave behind in order to rise again and to become fully complete in Christ. And there is much for us in common with our bisexual friends, our lesbian, our gay, our trans, our queer, our intersex friends. And as I said, as we finished our Bible study on Wednesday, it was the only comment I made through the whole evening because I was so intent on listening to the stories of people's lives. But what I said at the close is that if we are truly to be a radically inclusive church, and although we have identified these labels that I truly believe one day we'll let go of and just be people, but the labels still haunt us in so many different ways. But I said if we are truly to be this radically inclusive community of faith, then our job together as people of God, no matter what label we might put on ourselves, is to ever seek out the people who yet don't have a name, the people who are still on the fringe of society, the people who are still fearful to come out into their fullness as human beings. And that our job together is to continue to look beyond ourselves, beyond our own oppression, beyond our own freedom, and to look for the next peoples that God is drawing closest to us so that we can stand alongside one another. I believe MCC is poised not to be an open and affirming church, but to be an open and celebrate you church, to celebrate all that we are, and to allow each and every one of us to fully come alive to whoever God has created us to be, to die over and over again to the old, and to rise again to the new, that we can so physically see within our trans community, and that we can allow that gift to be our gift today, to die to the old and to rise again to the new. May God bless us as we become that radically inclusive church. May God bless us as we challenge ourselves and our own fears and our own prejudices and our own agendas. May God bless us as we sit alongside one another and we beg each other to tell our stories. And may God affirm with us, just as God affirmed in the Apostle Paul in his own transformation. And if you want to read about Paul's transformation, I want to encourage you to start at the book of Acts and go through the New Testament. But to know that Paul, who was once an oppressor, finally became a liberator. And you and I this morning, as we in this church ever widen those doors of welcome in ourselves, knowing that we still have our own oppression and that we still have our own prejudices, but that you and I today together can affirm that this church, as with the Apostle Paul, can look at one another in the eye and say, if God is for you, who can stand against you? May that be the gift that we offer to one another, no matter who we are, or where we are, or where we've come from.